AITA for not funding my sister's college after my parents abandoned me for being a boy. I am 25 years old now. My story really begins back when I was 6, or maybe even at my birth. I am the third and youngest child. We were never wealthy, but my parents made enough to raise 3 kids. We lived in a small town in a family home that had been passed down, which saved us a lot on housing costs. My grandparents lived nearby and had a large vegetable garden and some chickens, which covered a good portion of our groceries. My dad was a long-haul truck driver and was only home every 3 or 4 days. My mom worked as a waitress at the local diner. My parents already had 2 daughters when I came along. I was an unplanned pregnancy, and you can imagine how some parents feel when that happens. Of course, I did not understand any of this as a child, but as I got older, I started to piece things together, and it was not a good feeling to know you were not wanted. My parents had considered not going through with the pregnancy, but their doctor advised against it due to potential health complications for my mother. My parents, especially my mother, had desperately wanted another girl. Her reasoning was simple. She wanted me to wear my older sister's hand-me-downs so she would not have to buy new clothes. My 2 older sisters are only a year apart, so they were practically the same size and shared clothes all the time. She seemed to enjoy that. However, when I was born a boy, my parents were deeply disappointed. They resented me, made me wear girls' clothing, and even sent me to kindergarten in my sister's old school outfits. It was incredibly embarrassing for me, even at that age. Though I was very young, I still have these hazy memories of being bullied on the playground for wearing a girl's uniform and having long hair. If I ever complained, my mother would discipline me harshly. I grew up hearing only criticism and sharp words from my parents. I did not understand most of it at the time, but when I finally did, I started to resent them. My dad was slightly better than my mom, but he was gone most of the time and had a temper. Some days, he seemed to treat all 3 of us the same, but on other days, he was just as bad as my mom, if not worse. I would not say I was a well-behaved child. I started acting out once I understood the favoritism. My sisters always got the best of everything, and I got whatever was left over. So, I started being mean to them because, in my child's mind, I blamed them for my unhappiness. My father punished me for my actions, sometimes quite severely. I often had to make my own breakfast, and there were many nights I went without dinner. I was just a 6-year-old kid dealing with all of this. There is one incident that I remember very clearly, and I think it was the turning point. That week, I had been relentlessly bullied at the park for dressing like a girl. I came home and saw that my mom had bought brand new outfits for my sisters for an upcoming holiday. Something inside me just snapped. I found a pair of scissors and cut the new clothes into little pieces. I know it was a destructive thing to do, and I am not proud of it, but I was so tired of being made fun of because of my parents. It came from a place of hurt, not malice. Instead of trying to understand my pain, my parents saw it as a final, unforgivable act. They decided to put me up for adoption. They waited for a month, but there were no inquiries from any agencies, and their frustration over that was taken out on me. My mother would constantly tell me how useless I was, that nobody wanted me. I remember hearing her say once, "If I had known he was going to be a boy, I never would have had him." It was devastating to know my parents hated me for something I had no control over. After a while, with no official adoption prospects, they started mentioning it to friends and family. My dad knew a man in the next town over who ran a food truck with his wife. They were living a very modest life, more so than us, but he had always wanted a son. They were in their late 30s and had been trying to have a child for over 10 years with no success. My dad spoke to them, and they agreed to adopt me right away. I remember the moment my dad told my mom and sisters the news. They were thrilled, genuinely happy to be getting rid of me. Dad also mentioned that the new family did not have much money and that I might not be able to continue school right away. Mom just rolled her eyes and said, "Whatever, just take him there tomorrow." I was standing in a corner, holding onto the curtain, completely stunned. Despite how much I disliked my family, I was terrified and hurt that I had to leave. Tears were welling up in my eyes, but I did not make a sound. They were all so happy, celebrating the moment, that they did not even notice I was there. When my dad finally saw me crying, he just came over, rubbed my back, and said, "Pack your things. We're leaving for your new family's house in the morning." I started sobbing when he said that, but I knew it was pointless. So, I went to my room, packed my small bag, and just prayed that my new family would be kinder. The next day, my dad drove me to the neighboring town. I cannot recall exactly what I was feeling, but I was not crying anymore. I think I was just numb during the drive, and as we left the house. My new family was, indeed, not well off. They lived in a small, one-bedroom apartment. They had converted a small storage space into a bedroom for me. I had no complaints. At least they made an effort to give me my own space. I had never had my own room, or even my own bed. My sisters shared a room with 2 beds, and I slept on a small cot in the corner. This new room was smaller, but it was mine. My new parents, Mary and John, were so warm and loving, but coming from such a dysfunctional home, I did not know how to accept it. I had seen my biological parents show affection to my sisters, but never to me. I was suspicious of Mary and John's kindness, thinking it was just temporary. I tried to keep my distance, terrified they would eventually cast me out too. That kind of childhood fear sticks with you. It took many months for me to realize they genuinely loved me and were not just pretending. I did not go to school for the rest of that year because of the mid-year move, but my new parents promised they would enroll me the following fall. I watched them work incredibly hard, saving every dollar they could to send me to school. That is when I finally started to love them back. The adoption turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. My biological parents never contacted us again after dropping me off with Mary and John. Honestly, I was relieved. Here, I was allowed to be a boy. Mary and John were the hardest working people I have ever known. They worked 14 to 16 hours a day in their food truck. The truck was parked right on the street in front of their apartment building, so I was never really alone while they worked. I could see them right from my bedroom window. As I got older, I started spending my days in the truck, helping out however I could. Once I was enrolled in school, I focused on my studies but still helped with the business when I was free. By the time I was a little over 10, I was helping John with the register. I was always good with numbers, so I learned about business and basic accounting from a young age. After I graduated from high school, I wanted to dedicate myself full-time to their business, but they both insisted I go to college first. They paid for it with the money they had saved over the years. They were getting older, and running the food truck was taking a toll on them. I wanted to take on their responsibilities just as they had taken on mine, but they assured me they could manage for a few more years and that my education had to come first. I majored in business and accounting in college because, ultimately, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. My graduation day was one of the happiest days of my life. John and Mary were beaming with pride. They even extended an invitation to my biological parents to attend the ceremony, but they never showed up. After college, my plan was to take over the food truck so Mary and John could retire, but they had other ideas. They had managed to save up a considerable amount of money over the years, and they gave it all to me. I was completely overwhelmed by their generosity. They told me they could support themselves for a few more years, but did not want to hold me back. They gave me that money to start my own business. I did not want to squander their life savings. I used my business knowledge and looked for a small, well-located local restaurant that was struggling. I approached the owner with a proposal to lease it under a profit-sharing agreement. After a few rejections, I found someone willing to take a chance. I started from scratch, renovating the space, redesigning the menu to appeal to a younger crowd, and focusing on top-notch customer service. Within a year, sales had skyrocketed, and I had doubled their investment. 4 years later, I now own 3 successful cafes in the city. I moved Mary and John into a much nicer, more comfortable apartment. I also got a small place for myself, as I had been living with them until then. I begged them to sell the food truck and enjoy their retirement, but they insisted on keeping it running a few days a week, saying it kept them happy. When I left my biological parents' house with that small bag, I never imagined I would even graduate from college, let alone be running a chain of restaurants. Fast forward to last month. It was a typical workday. I was helping out at the register in one of my cafes when I saw a familiar face. It was like seeing a ghost. It was my biological father. I had not seen him in nearly 2 decades. He looked much older and more frail. He walked across the cafe with a big smile and gave me a hug. The cafe was busy, so I did not say anything and just led him to a quiet corner. Seeing his face brought back a flood of painful childhood memories. I probably would not have recalled all these details if he had not shown up. He said he was so happy and proud to see how successful I had become. I did not know what to say. I just stood there, completely numb. He mentioned he was just passing through and had run into John, who told him about my success. He said he would bring my biological mother by over the weekend. I did not respond, and he left soon after. After my shift, I went to see John and told him I had no desire to see the people who disowned me for being a boy. He knew all about my painful past. I wanted to just leave town for the weekend and hide, but Mary urged me to try and forgive them and move forward. I agreed to meet them, but only on the condition that Mary and John would be there with me. So, my biological parents came over to John and Mary's apartment. I thought they might apologize for what they did to me, but they showed absolutely no remorse. Instead, they started listing all the favors they had done for me. My biological mother said I should be grateful to them for finding me such good parents who raised me to be a successful man. I was stunned. I wanted to argue, but Mary squeezed my hand, signaling me to stay calm. I just said diplomatically that I was blessed to have John and Mary as my parents. The whole meeting was incredibly uncomfortable for me. The next day, I got a call from my biological mother. I did not even recognize her voice. Why would I? It was the first time she had called me in 20 years. She was asking for money. She said my dad had lost his steady trucking job years ago and had only been getting sporadic contract work. She had also lost her waitressing job because, as she put it, no one wants to hire a 50-year-old waitress. They were struggling to pay their bills. I asked how much she needed, and she said $20,000 would be enough. She claimed she had borrowed that amount from friends over the past few months just to buy groceries, and now those friends were demanding to be paid back. I ended the call by saying I would think about it. Here was my dilemma. As much as I resented them, I felt a pang of guilt. People were apparently coming after them for money. A part of me thought she was just trying to manipulate me, but if they were truly in trouble, I would feel terrible for letting them face that humiliation when I had the means to help. Update 1. Thank you all for the comments and support. I got a wide range of opinions about whether to give my biological mother the $20,000. I talked it over with Mary and John. Mary was glad I was considering helping my parents, but also warned me to be careful. John said it was my money and my decision. He shared my concern. What if this was just the beginning of them trying to take advantage of me? After a lot of thought, I decided to take this one final chance on my biological parents. I transferred the money to their bank account. For a moment, it felt good to help them, despite everything they had done. But I was wrong. Or maybe, I was right all along, because my fear that they would try to exploit me financially was about to come true. A week after I sent the money, my biological mother called again. I answered, not knowing what to expect. She thanked me for the help and then said, "Your sisters really want to see you. When do you think you could come visit?" For a second, I genuinely felt like maybe my family wanted to reconnect. I have held on to my anger for my parents, but I never truly hated my sisters. As a child, I acted out against them, but as I grew up, I knew it was not their fault. There were even times I wondered if my parents gave me up simply because they could not afford another child, not just because they were cruel. I told my mother I could drive over to their house the following Sunday. She quickly cut in, "Oh, why don't we meet somewhere else instead?" I did not think too much of it at the time and just agreed. She said she would text me the details. After we hung up, a strange feeling crept over me. Why did not she want me to come to their house? I mean, it does not really matter where you meet, but when you are reuniting with family after so many years, would not you invite them to your home instead of a restaurant? She sent me the restaurant details later, and it was one of the most expensive places in the city. I was so focused on the fact that they had not invited me to their home that I did not even process the choice of venue. When I got to the restaurant, they were all already there. My sisters ran up and hugged me, and for a moment, it felt good to see them again. I was actually enjoying catching up with them, right up until the menus came and they started ordering. It was like they were deliberately picking the most expensive items. When the waiter asked my dad for his order, he just smiled and said, "Get him the priciest thing on the menu. My son's a big shot now." It was such a petty thing to say. If John or Mary had said something like that, I would have felt proud, but coming from him, it just felt mean and manipulative. There was nothing I could do. I just sat there and watched them enjoy a lavish meal, all on my dime. Of course, I paid the bill. I had wild thoughts about just getting up and leaving before the check came, but I could not bring myself to do it. But I swore to myself in that moment that I would never let them emotionally manipulate me again. I was quiet and distant for the rest of the meal, though I doubt they even noticed. As we were leaving, they still did not invite me to their home. Instead, my older sister asked, "So, where are we going for dinner next?" I forced a smile and said, "Nowhere," then said my goodbyes and left. I went home and told Mary about how greedy my biological family had been. She was appalled. She is a very kind and self-reliant person, so she found their behavior disturbing. She advised me not to let them play me for a fool again and to just focus on my life. So I did. My sisters called a few times over the next week, but I did not answer. My biological mother called too, and I ignored her as well. Months went by, and the calls and texts finally stopped. I figured they had gotten the message that I wanted nothing to do with them. Update 2. Hello everyone. Thank you again for all the support. As I mentioned in my last update, I cut off contact with my biological family after realizing they were only interested in my money. It had been almost 5 months, and then yesterday, my biological mother called again. I saw her name on the screen, and, on an impulse, I answered. She started with insincere small talk, asking how I was and how my business was doing. She sounded so fake that I could not stand it. I just cut to the chase and asked what she wanted. She took a deep breath and told me that my sisters had to drop out of college because my dad could not afford their tuition. She wanted me to pay for their education. I was furious. She told me to calm down, saying that they are my sisters, my family, and that it was my duty to help them. I was at work and did not want to cause a scene, so I just hung up. She called back later that afternoon. I ignored it a few times, but it kept buzzing, and I knew ignoring her was not a long-term solution. The next time she called, I answered. She asked, "So, your sisters are so excited to get back to their classes. How should we do this? Are you going to pay the full tuition at once or semester by semester? I think you should just transfer the full amount to my account, and I will handle the payments. That way you don't have to worry about it." I said, "Hold on. I'm not making any payments." She was shocked into silence. She was clearly not expecting a direct refusal. She stammered, "What do you mean you won't pay it all at once?" "That's fine. We can do installments." I repeated myself. I am not paying for it at all. My sister's education is not my responsibility, especially not after my own parents abandoned me and never once looked back. Even now, the only reason you are talking to me is to get your hands on my money. She flew into a rage. "Don't you forget that we are the ones who brought you into this world. Everything you have is because of us. Your father found you a good family, and now that it is your turn to pay us back, you can't just walk away from your responsibilities. Your sisters and your parents are your responsibility, and you need to take care of us." I had so much I wanted to say, but I knew it would be like talking to a brick wall. These people were narcissists. So, I just said, "You're right, I do owe everything to my parents. Their names are John and Mary, and they deserve all the credit for my success. As for you, I am not sure who you are. None of my legal documents have your name on them. And I do not have a single photograph with you, so I do not think I know you." She started shouting insults at me, but I just said, "Wrong number, ma'am," and hung up. You can call me selfish or cruel, but I am not going to waste my hard-earned money on my so-called family. They were never my family. They got rid of me when I was barely 6 years old. And to clarify something from my previous posts, some people asked why I called John and Mary by their first names instead of mom and dad. In reality, I did not start calling them mom and dad right away, but as they worked so hard to send me to school and raise me, I grew to love them deeply, and they became my mom and dad. I only used their first names here for clarity in the story. John and Mary are my real parents. I do not call my biological parents anything at all. To me, they simply do not exist. Story 2. Cheated on by my wife. I found out my wife cheated on me with a guy she met at a convention, so I exposed both of them. My wife and I got married about 5 years ago. We always got along incredibly well and loved doing all the nerdy things together. We were both big into video games, loved anime, and shared a passion for geek culture. She was my whole world, and I always thought things were perfect between us. We fell for each other hard and fast, about 3 years before we got married. In fact, I met her at a convention and just knew we were a perfect match. We hit it off talking about our love for The Legend of Zelda and debating the latest chapter of One Piece. Some people spend their lives searching for their soulmate. For me, she was it. We got married fairly quickly and even had a geek-themed wedding where we encouraged our guests to come in costume. Because of our jobs and the high cost of tickets and travel, we did not get to go to conventions very often. But for our 5th anniversary, I wanted to do something special. I do not make a huge salary, but I make enough to provide a comfortable life for us. I surprised her with tickets to one of the biggest comic conventions in the country. It was the kind of event that fans dream of attending. She was absolutely ecstatic, and I could not wait to go with her. I have never been great with women. I could never really tell if someone was interested in me until long after the fact. It was the same with my wife. It took 3 long nights of chatting on Discord for me to finally realize that she liked me and wanted to get to know me better. When we got to the convention, everything was going great. A woman dressed as slave Princess Leia kept complimenting my last-minute stormtrooper costume. After she walked away, my wife pulled me aside and told me that the woman had been flirting with me. I told her I had not even noticed. I am just that bad at picking up on social cues. My wife seemed a little frustrated, but we moved on with our day. It was a 3-day convention, and that night we went to a fan meetup. That is where it all started. He was dressed as Han Solo. My wife, who was also dressed as Princess Leia, struck up a conversation with him. They started talking more and more, getting physically closer. I eventually stepped in and mentioned that I was her husband. The guy said it was nice to meet me, but would not make eye contact. After he left, I asked my wife about it. She insisted nothing was going on and that he was just a nice guy who liked her costume. She was a massive Star Wars fan, so she loved talking about it. I decided to let it go, telling myself it was nothing. The weekend continued. The next morning, my wife said she was feeling sick and exhausted. I told her I would go down to the convention floor for a bit and check back in later. I left, but I could not shake the feeling from the night before. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. But then, my wife stopped responding to my texts. We still had 1 full day of the convention left. I bought her a small gift to bring back to the room. As I approached our room, I could hear faint noises from inside, like muffled voices and movement. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe it was the TV. But when I opened the door, she was there, and she froze when she saw me. It was clear from the scene that something had just taken place. I confronted her, but she denied that anything had happened. I looked around the room, but there was no one else there. The convention ended, and my wife became distant. She started working longer hours and would come home completely drained. I would ask if she wanted to watch a movie, but she would always say she was too busy. I could not get the sounds I had heard in the hotel room out of my head. Then I noticed that her Discord notifications were muted. She had never once muted them in our entire relationship, so I knew something was wrong. I picked up her phone, surprised the passcode was still the same, and started reading her messages. They were from the guy she met at the Star Wars meetup. He was constantly flirting with her, and they were exchanging inappropriate pictures. He even talked about wanting to roleplay with her, and she was all for it. I was furious. I put the phone down, shaking with anger, and pretended I had not seen a thing. My wife asked if I was okay, and I lied and told her everything was fine. But everything was not fine. I started looking up the process for filing for divorce. It was going to be messy, but I wanted to humiliate her and show her that I knew everything. I told her about another upcoming convention and said that I would not be able to go, but that she should. A little spark lit up in her eyes. Even though we were on the rocks, this was still my partner, the person I thought I would spend my life with, who was so easily casting me aside. It was a gut punch, but I could not let her see it. The day of the convention arrived, and I put my plan into motion. I had done some digging on this guy. It turned out he worked pretty close to us. I went to the convention and found them, just as I expected, standing in line to meet their favorite voice actor. This was it. I watched them from a distance, then got in line a few people behind them. I wore a face mask to conceal my identity, but kept my eyes locked on them. When they got to the front of the line, the voice actor asked them how they were doing. She pulled the guy closer and said she was having a wonderful day. They kissed, and that is when I made my move. I stepped right between them, pulled off my mask, and stared directly at my wife. She dropped his hand and looked at me in shock, asking what I was doing there. I started yelling at her, saying I had caught her with him and that she had cheated on me. She tried to deny it, but I pulled out printouts of their Discord messages and slammed them down on the autograph table. The other people in line were staring, shocked that I would cause such a scene. But I was not done. I announced to everyone that my wife was a cheater and that she had been unfaithful with this guy she had met at a convention. The celebrity stood up, said they needed to take a break, and quickly left the area. My wife's eyes filled with tears, and she begged me to listen to her. But I could not. I told her she had lied to me, saying she was going to the convention alone. I told her I knew about their meetups, about the long nights at the office that were actually spent playing games with him, not her friends. One night, I had called one of her friends to ask about their game night, and she said she had no idea what I was talking about because they were all busy with holiday prep. My wife just stood there, completely humiliated. She tried to tell me she had been thinking about asking for an open relationship. I told her I did not want to hear it. She was furious that I had embarrassed her like that, but she knew she was in the wrong. We went home. I packed a bag and checked into a hotel. I got all of my things out of the house and contacted a lawyer to get the divorce papers ready. She tried to convince me to stay, to try an open relationship where I could be with other women and she could be with other men. I never wanted that. I only ever wanted her. She was my love, my everything. My actions had consequences. Someone had recorded the whole incident and posted it all over social media. I went through with the divorce and ended up getting the house and most of our shared assets. I sold the house immediately. I could not stand to be there with all the memories. I do not know what happened to my wife. The entire geek community knew the story, and it was a huge scandal on Twitter and other platforms for a while. From what I gathered, her boss eventually found out about it, and I am not sure if she lost her job or not. Frankly, I do not care. My search for love will continue, but it will not be with someone who is unfaithful. Comment. After hearing stories like these, I am reminded of how important it is to define our own worth. Setting boundaries is not a sign of selfishness. It is an act of profound self-respect. You can be a kind person with a good heart and still say no to what hurts you. We are not responsible for healing the people who broke us or for fixing situations we did not create. Our primary responsibility is to our own peace and well-being. Choosing to walk away from a toxic dynamic is one of the most powerful steps you can take toward healing. It shows you value your future more than you fear the discomfort of change. You deserve relationships built on genuine care, not obligation or convenience. Always remember that your peace is a priority, and you have the right to protect it. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.